Well, hey there, idiots. Welcome back to Observe and to episode 2 of the Stephanie Lazarus nonverbal analysis. In today's video, we will obviously be continuing our analysis of Stephanie Lazarus. For those of you who don't know who she is, go and check out video number 1. I explain kind of who she is and what she did in order to get into this specific position that we are working through here. However, I will say, as I try to do in as many videos as I can, that nonverbal reading is on average 70 to 80% accurate with a little bit of leeway on either side. It can be pushed all the way up to 100% accuracy given the right circumstances, and it can drop all the way down to below a guessing average as well, given the right circumstances. So with that in mind, these videos that you see here on the internet, specifically on YouTube, are meant largely for entertainment purposes, but with the purpose of also being able to add some educational content to the YouTube sphere. So keep that in mind. These should never be used as legal evidence or in any professional realm. They are meant for your consumption here on the platform. I think that's enough of a disclaimer. Let's go ahead and roll the intro, and then I think we could actually do some more analysis. So we left this off in the middle of the interrogation last time. We're going to pick right up from where we left off in the last video, and we'll see how this goes. Since this already has a conclusion, we're not trying to figure out whether or not she's guilty. We know she is. This is centered around education purposes, which means that we might not make it through the entire interrogation due to the fact that it could get repetitive in what I'm saying. But let's see how it goes, and we'll figure it out from there.
You know, I'm sure I talked to him.
Yeah.
But you're not sure where he moved to after he got married?
No idea. I mean,
Never went over to visit?
So all of her expressions that she is using right now are very overt. They're very intentional and very controlled. And that means that even during this time where she's trying to act like she's completely baffled, she's showing a mouth shrug, she's shaking her head, her eyebrows are drawn together and towards the middle in a sign of confusion, but it's all very, very overt. It's very, very intentional, and that's masking what would be underneath, which would be the seepage or the leakage of truth that we might be able to catch. So during this area, there's not too much to be able to catch onto, and in and of itself, because of how overt everything is, that would serve as an oddity to her baseline. This isn't how she normally would behave. She's more mellow in her mannerisms. While still quite expressive, she's still more mellow, but this overt acting is a red flag in and of itself. Let's continue.
Him or
I don't think.
his
I mean, I
wife
don't think so. I mean, I don't know. I don't.
So she's doing a lot of micro head movements here, and her mouth is pulled in a classic fear expression. This is one of the indicators of a fear expression, and it would be considered what is called a mini expression because it's largely on the bottom half of her face with activity still existing on the upper half of her face, but it's disjointed. And it's that disjointed aspect that makes it to where it is another red flag, because that means that it's forced. So what is going on there? Why is she forcing this fear? Why is she forcing this odd fear expression in this area that isn't caused by genuine subconscious emotional leakage? It's caused consciously. Why? Would be a good question there.
I think I did. I mean, I know he lived on Roscoe for a long, long time.
After John's wife died, you said you may have been talking to him. Did your relationship start up again?
I would say no. Again, can you give me a year?
Here's an interesting thing that's happening verbally. She says, I would say no. That's not what they asked. They asked, what did you do? Not what would you have done? And that is a verbal slippage. This can commonly happen in times of deceit or people trying to manage your impression of what the story is. They're trying to falsify information. So she said, I would say no, instead of saying no, it did not. And it's that I would say, or normally I would do, or it would actually be like this most of the time. These are all specific ways of guiding your perception of things. So she's trying to guide their perception and mislead them by saying, I would say no. Well, if you would say no, what did you actually say would be the appropriate question to follow up with there.
I mean, this is like 2009.
She died in 1986?
Yeah, I think it was 86.
1986.
Okay, like I said, I'm faintly remembering that I went to Hawaii with my friend Greg. Greg and I got certified for scuba diving. And I'm thinking that John met us there, meaning Greg and I.
After he got...
So she continually tries to divert attention once again with these extra stories that don't really have anything to do with the narrative that's being told. This is different from packing in extra detail that has applicability to the narrative. Now, something else that needs to be brought up is that in certain instances, even when people are innocent, they will nervously pack narratives just out of sheer need to fill dead space. That's not the case with Stephanie because her baseline shows that she knows how to tell a specific story. This is a straying from her baseline in that she's trying to divert attention. She's throwing up a smoke screen with this scuba diving narrative that she just threw herself onto. Along with that, we can see constant lip compressions, which is a biting back of emotion or negative words or anything along those lines, and that would make sense, but it's still very intentional and it's being held for some time. Now, genuine emotions, they have a certain profile to them where they have an onset, they have a peak where you could see most of the activity, and then they have an offset as well. And it follows this arc style movement, and with hers, they're oftentimes, they happen very quickly and then they last for a very long time, and then they die off very quickly. And it's a very odd profile for an emotion, and it's not a natural one. So we see that pop up again and again and again here. Now, I want to make something super clear here. This is all tailored to Stephanie Lazarus right now. These concepts and these ideas and this methodology that I'm talking about can be applied to other people, but it has to be tailored to them. You have to be able to find out a specific individual's tells and their nonverbal communication baseline to be able to help tailor your read to them. And shockingly enough, people can have more than one baseline. A baseline for a person who's having an everyday conversation with a friend is going to look different from that same person's baseline during an interview or a business setting. You yourself can think of this. You behave differently when you're in your business setting than you do when you're out at the bar having drinks with your friends. There's different behaviors. That being said, it doesn't mean that you're being deceitful in either side. It's just a different baseline, and it's a different mode of thinking, and it's a different form of nonverbal functionality. So in this sort of situation, it's still straying from her baseline, but it's her baseline that we're working with. Not the whole world's baseline, not so-and-so's baseline over there. This is Stephanie Lazarus's baseline. Let's keep watching.
Married or whatever, were you dating anybody in particular?
And that was what year? 1986, you said?
I think you got married in around 85, 86, something like that. Were you seeing anyone seriously, or?
God, I couldn't say. Geez, I'm trying to think. I mean, you know, I dated a fireman. Randy may have dated a gal.
Okay, so they asked if she was dating anybody during that time, and she immediately throws up her common expression of, I'm so completely baffled by my own history that I couldn't even tell you what my own name is by the time I'm done talking, which we know is irregular for two separate reasons. Being that hindsight is 2020, we know this is irregular not only because during the time of this sort of event, which would stick in a person's mind quite clearly, quite prevalently, the crime that she committed was very brutal and very, very physical, so it would stick in her psyche for a very long time. All of the circumstances and details centered around that would also stick out quite clearly and quite sharply in her memory. So we know that is a lie in and of itself, that she can't remember any of these details around that. But that's just because of hindsight being 2020. On the other side, say we didn't have hindsight to be so beneficial to us. Say we had to enter into this in these investigators' perspective. Well, she has areas of very clear detail recollection on anywhere else other than something that could incriminate her. The only areas that she has a hard time remembering stuff is centered around her recollection of anything that could tie her to the crime. That is suspicious behavior. That would be an odd anomaly in her behavior. Why can she remember things that are contemporary to that, but not related to the crime in any way? But as soon as the crime stuff begins to be brought up, now she's blanking it. So that is an oddity in her recollective state. So this would be a red flag as well if we didn't have the benefit of hindsight. Let's continue watching.
That Mike was dating, and then Randy broke up with that gal. I couldn't even tell you the gal's name, if I'm even thinking of the story right. And then I started dating Randy.
Yeah.
So again, I mean, not like I was
A lot of shrugging in there, insincerity or insecurity in what she's saying. She has a nervous laugh with "I'm dating Randy." And she also just earlier had gone off on a long tangent about another person that she was dating who was a fireman and details in that, which once again we have this issue of contemporary understanding and recollection, but if it's related to the crime, no recollection whatsoever. So it's still that oddity is flashing up, and as we see her flashing these insecurity gestures with a lopsided shrug, it's still adding this character sketch, this nonverbal character sketch of her that she really, 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 really does not want to be at all attributed to this crime. She was on the team that was technically investigating it. If I remember correctly and my research was correct, she was a part of the team that was investigating the crime itself. So she would remember it still. And I know that there are going to be some people out there that are like, oh, but I can't remember everything. I can't remember what I ate yesterday. That is true. It's very true. Memory is very fickle and it's very, very plastic, actually. It's easy to bend and twist and make you remember things that actually didn't happen and so on and so forth. That's true. But that's in normal cases. Right now, she's trying to block out and circumvent a very brutal killing. That's a different scenario than what you're talking about. Unless it's not, and then that's unnerving in and of itself. If you're also trying to circumvent and not talk about a brutal killing that you did, then there are other issues, and I'm not super stoked that you're here watching this channel, unless you're watching it from prison, and then I have other questions all the way around. Anyway, let's keep watching.
huge floozy or anything, but
No.
As far as you recall, after John's wife died, did you start a relationship again with John, or dating casually or anything like that?
So what we see here is a desynchronized onset of an expression from her. They ask a question, and when you feel an emotion, it plays out on the face, oftentimes very, very synchronized. It happens all at once. But you see here that for her, as she forces this absolutely confused, baffled emotion that we have seen her do time and time and time again in relation to this crime, it happens in her eyes and then it washes down across the rest of her face. That's desynchronization. Instead of it all happening at once, like, I don't know, it's, I don't know, and it's stilted and it's desynchronized. That's another red flag for a nonverbal analyst to pay attention to, because it's a sign of a forced emotion. Why is she forcing it? Well, we know because she's the murderer. But at the time, they wouldn't have known that. So their question is, why is she forcing it? Why is she forcing this confusion? It's a good question, and they eventually find out the answer to that.
like I said, he met Greg and I in Hawaii.
So I fast forwarded it through there as well, because it's yet another tangent that she's throwing in about the trip to Hawaii that they don't care about. It's not applicable to the story, and it's her means of trying to throw up another smokescreen. Once again, people can do this out of nerves and be completely innocent, but that's due to their baseline. That's due to them specifically. In Stephanie Lazarus's specific case, it's not her nerves that are causing her to do this. This is her desire to circumvent and move around and avoid the topic of the crime that she committed.
What island did we go to? I think the Big Island in Kauai.
I mean, when you heard about...
Yet another tangent Again about Hawaii, still doing the same thing, diversion through extra information.
John's wife being killed, I mean, what was your reaction? I mean, you thought you heard about it, what, through a friend or in a bulletin or
Either
something?
a friend or a bulletin. I called the family. I called maybe some of his friends that I knew, and I mean, obviously it shocked you. If I heard it at work, which I may have, I faintly remember a bulletin going around,
If I heard it at work, which I may have, blah, 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 so on and so forth, all of these extra details, but also it's that if instead of what did happen, she's trying to build a narrative that could have happened, would have happened, might have happened, instead of the one that did happen. And she's trying to dress it up under the guise, again, of this fallible memory that she has, which isn't that fallible, once again, outside of the crime itself. Which, just thinking of that specific aspect, it's a wonder how she got away with this for so long. And oftentimes the reason is because people who are close to somebody, be it coworker, family member, relative, friend, so on and so forth, you are willingly blind to what could be evident to other people. And so chances are people that were working with Stephanie, they did not want to see what was probably very evident. From what I'm seeing here, she's not a master manipulator or liar. She's not a great actress. She's actually garbage at all of those. So the question is, why did it take just so long to get to this point? And nobody wants to see the truth in situations like this. Nobody wants to find out that their coworker was a murderer. Nobody wants to find out that their relative or friend or whoever she has relationally around her is a murderer. Nobody wants that. So they'll hide it from themselves, subconsciously even. People will block that out of their attention. And it's unfortunate because it means that she got away with a crime for a very long time, and she really shouldn't have. There really wasn't too good of an excuse for it.
Do you know what the circumstances were regarding her death?
Geez, let me think back. I don't know if it was, if it was a burglary or something.
So she's still doing these forced expressions, which we've already talked about the profile of expressions and how the longevity of it can determine whether or not an expression is genuine or false. And these could still reside in the genuine emotion side. It's really close to that line, but they last a little bit longer than they should. And they're always consistently centered around the case, like we've said. And then she brings up details that specifically do not involve her. Obviously, it would be odd if she brought up details about it involving her, but she only brings up the idea of it maybe being like a robbery or a burglary gone wrong or something like that. That's the only thing she can recall, which we know isn't true. But at the time, it's still odd because one of the theories that was brought up was that it was her. And in innocence, people who are genuinely telling the truth are not afraid to admit their own fallbacks in recollecting things. So she could say, it was weird. I was a suspect, actually, of this murder. It was so ridiculous because I knew the guy, so on and so forth. That would stick out to her because it's a very serious thing to be accused of something like this. So she could have said that, but she didn't because she doesn't want any attention brought towards her at this. Which, yes, we could understand. If she was innocent and she didn't want that attention, then maybe she wouldn't mention that anyways. But if she knew for sure that she didn't do it, it would be almost more credible for her to bring up the fact that she was at one point brought up as a suspect. It's still fascinating. I know a lot of this is wordplay. We went over a lot of the nonverbal stuff in the previous one, and I'm trying to make this a full-fledged two-parter here, and this is kind of where it's leading us so far. Let's keep analyzing to see what else sticks out.
I mean, it's been so many years. I can faintly think that I may have saw a flyer.
Yeah.
May have had her picture on it. That's why I say, if somebody had called me, I may not have known what her last name was. Maybe if you told me, I would remember it.
Do you remember the first name?
Shelley, Sherry. I don't know, something maybe, like I said, it's
Even that was awkward. And it was just due to the light desynchronization that's in there. And so she's saying it's Shelly or Sherry. I really have no idea who it was that I butchered. No idea at all. I don't even lightly know. I know all of these weird extraneous details around this case, but I just don't even know. I don't know any names, I don't know any dates, I don't know any times, I don't know any circumstances, I know nothing about this specific questioning that you're doing that's involved with this case, but I can sure as hell tell you all of this other detail about everything else, about Hawaii, about firemen, about any other smokescreen that she's thrown up, showing that her memory is perfectly fine and that this is an area of questioning that she's not comfortable with. She's not comfortable with it at all. And instead of just saying, I'm really uncomfortable with this, so I'm having a hard time talking about it, she doesn't even say that. She's just trying to act like she's never even heard of it even. It's very strange. Very strange, as I'm sure you're noticing.
It's been so many years, and
From all the years, as far as you can remember, do you remember ever talking to her?
well, I said earlier, I mean, I may have, and now I'm thinking I may have gone to her and say, hey, you know what, is he dating you? He's bothering me, and so I'm thinking that we had a conversation about that.
Just very interesting nonverbal communication during this time. She has some shrugging during times where she says, I may have done this conversation with her about something else, and I just may have done this, and I may have done that, and her body language is conveying insincerity, and her words are conveying that she is not really holding any weight to her words either. So the question is, why does she have just no confidence in what she's saying? That would be the question then without hindsight. Obviously, the answer now is that the reason she has no confidence in it is because it was all fake, but they didn't have that benefit of hindsight then. It should have been a red flag. I think it was. It would have been if I were there. And let's continue watching.
One or two, maybe. It could have been three. I don't want to say I had 3 conversations with her.
Like at her work or at their house or?
No, I'm thinking that he obviously must have told me where she worked. I'm thinking it was a hospital somewhere in LA, and I could have been, again, what year was that?
Interesting. So while she's recollecting again, you see her eyes relax and they go into that classic state of remembrance that I've talked about before. Then as soon as it starts to come around to where she has to remember other details, you can see her eyes widen up and she's once again not recalling anymore. She's smoke screening. It's unfortunate.
Where was I working? 92 or 93, there was the big earthquake. No, when was the big earthquake? April of 92, because I stopped teaching DARE.
So she just had a whole bunch of tangents again there, all filled with detail, all relative to the timing of the incident itself. But once again, as soon as we get to the incident itself, everything's blank. This could be considered at the time, say they didn't know. This could be considered relation to trauma. People who have gone through a traumatic event will oftentimes not be able to remember the details of that traumatic event as their psyche tries to protect themselves from that trauma, from that difficult psychological processing that has to take place. There will be gaps in memory. But that's not the case, as we know, but it would be something that they would have to consider then. So as they're asking all these questions and understanding where Stephanie is going with her specific, very twisted and oftentimes fuzzy narrative that she's delivering, I'm sure that is one of the things that they considered at the time. However, it didn't fit with the rest of her psychological profile that they have, because in law enforcement, you have a psychological profile that people have on file. It's part of your file. So that wouldn't fit in with that. And it would be absolutely a red flag for these investigators.
I think I stopped teaching DARE sometime in 92.
When you said
So she has a very long expression of this recollection look, and it's very static. That's part of it, is that as emotion plays out and as psychological processing plays out across the face, it's not a static situation, it's a very dynamic situation. Emotions don't last on the face for extended periods of time. They just simply don't. If they do, they're beginning to become forced. There's always changes in those emotions. It can be the general same idea. If somebody is very sad, they will look sad. They will look like they're in torment. But their face isn't just like constantly, I'm just sad. Even in university, I was watching a clip of this couple. They were found out to have murdered all their children, but they were at a press conference and their expressions were static the entire time. They tried to hold this static expression of grief the entire time, and it felt off, but people then weren't aware, and it wasn't until a little bit later that it came out that they were actually the culprits. And so immediately, non-verbally, that stands out as an oddity, and it's not irregular, and you can see it here. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and stop this here. I've been recording for a while here, so this video is going to be okay anyways. Non-verbally speaking, Stephanie Lazarus was a train wreck all the way around, and it was both intentional and you could see some seepage here and there. But what really set her apart as odd was her memory, her very intentional memory in areas she had so much detail. She understood so much, she could recollect so much, down to street names, locations, talking about details of places in Hawaii, so on and so forth, all contemporary with the crime. But as soon as it gets to the crime itself, all of that detail goes away. Now, it didn't fit into her psychological profile that she was suffering from a traumatic event centered specifically around that. And even if it was evident that she was suffering from trauma around that case, the question would then be raised again, why is she suffering from trauma from this case individually, this case that she has already been tied to? So that in and of itself was a red flag. More or less, Stephanie dug herself her own grave in this. And the investigators eventually unearthed everything, and she is now serving her sentence. Rightfully so. So this is where you can see that nonverbal communication relies on many, many different facets. It's not just the body language or the micro expressions or the movements of the face and the body. It relies on things like tone. It relies on verbal patterns. It relies on the consistency of the voice, pitch, volume, so on and so forth. It relies on psychophysiology, where we had a little bit more trouble seeing it in all areas, but in the first video you could see her breathing increase in areas of stress. That's part of her psychophysiology as well. It relies on all of these different channels of communication to be able to compile an entire character sketch as to who she is non-verbally. And I hope this makes sense to you. I hope that this was educational. I know it's entertaining just to watch her in general. If you would like to be able to see a video that tells the story of Stephanie Lazarus quite well, go ahead and check out JCS Criminal Psychology. He does an excellent job at the research and presentation of the stories. It's very gripping, and it's not biased like you would see on TV, for instance, where it's all hammed up with dramatic music and god-awful editing and some sort of over-the-top narrator talking about how these things happened. So if you want to be able to see true crime content delivered to you in such a way that's factual and still engaging, go check out JCS Criminal Psychology. I hope you enjoyed this analysis. If you have some other suggestions for me, let me know in the comments below. I'm always trying to keep up with the comments, though I have a lot of trouble. But if I see enough of a name or a case or something like that pop up in the comments, eventually it's able to catch my attention and it'll turn into a video. So if you do have a suggestion, let me know in the comments below and I might be able to get around to it. If you would like to be able to help support the channel, there's a few ways you can do that, and those are all the links in the description below. Literally any of those help the channel out, so go ahead and check those out if you'd like. If you did like the video, hit the like button, hit subscribe if you want to see more videos like this and others, and then hit the bell button if you would like to be able to catch things like very impromptu and unannounced live streams. I'll do them on occasion, and then they go and hide away forever on Patreon, so if you want to be a part of those, consider that. But, without further ado, that's all that I've got for today. My name is Logan, and you have been oh so awesome as you always are, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys.